Today's video is brought to you by NordVPN. Alright folks, the season 6 finale of Rick and Morty came and went, and while I did think it was a very fun episode, there is no question that it was also a huge tease. There were some pretty fun reveals / twists, some relatively thorough Star Wars fandom commentary, and of course a pretty explicit tease for what we should expect from the show moving forward. Sort of? I don't know. I've got a lot of thoughts about this season, so let's break down Ricktional Mortpoon's Rickmas Mortcation. And folks, thanks so much for sticking with me through all of Rick and Morty Season 6. I covered 8 out of 10 episodes this year, and talking about the show with y'all has been really fun and rewarding. I will definitely be covering Season 7 next year, so I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. We'll also be covering Season 6 on our podcast, Cartoons That Curse, relatively soon, so stay tuned for that as well. Thanks, y'all. So, as I'm sure you know if you're a Rick and Morty fan, Rick is no stranger to security threats. I mean, he rigged his entire house to lock up to prevent infiltrators in a pinch. And today's sponsor, NordVPN, can help you do the same thing with your computer and mobile devices. Do you ever use public Wi-Fi to save on data charges or work while you're out of the house? Well, unsecured internet connections are a huge risk. But by using NordVPN, you can protect yourself from outsiders being able to access your devices or data. You can even use your VPN to explore international streaming libraries. Look, Australia's Netflix has every episode of Rick and Morty, including Season 6, and this will work for countless streaming services as well. NordVPN is also a useful safety tool, and it can guard your device from malicious websites and malware. Thanks to their threat protection, you'll know that your information is secure. You can use NordVPN on your computer or mobile devices, and you can choose to connect from 60 different countries. Go to nordvpn.com/Johnny2Cellos and get a 2-year plan with 4 months free. And there's no risk because Nord offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. So, if you want to keep your devices secure, go to nordvpn.com/Johnny2Cellos. Once again, that is nordvpn.com/Johnny2Cellos. So right off the bat, this episode does a sort of mini reveal that recontextualizes the entire previous episode, which I did not cover, so maybe this worked out well. But we find out that Rick dispatched a robot version of himself to occupy the family while he continues to hunt down Rick Prime.
I'm no good to anybody until I resolve this arch nemesis crap.
And I think this created for 2 really interesting dynamics. One, everything between Robot Rick, the Smith family, and particularly Morty was very compelling. Because Robot Rick was programmed to care 22% more, he actually feels immense regret that he's been deceiving the family, and all he wants is relief in the form of both confession, which he is programmed to be incapable of doing, and sweet, sweet death, which he does eventually get. But the scenes where Robo-Rick is trying so hard to basically admit to the family that he's a robot without literally admitting he's a robot, I found super interesting.
You're not a robot, are you?
Ha! Put it this way, honey. If I am, I'm a robot programmed to love you very, very much.
Aww.
But the other dynamic that this whole situation also extrapolates on significantly is actual Rick and his current relation to Morty. It's no secret that as the show has gone on longer and longer, Morty has become more independent. When the series started, he was incredibly naive and understood very little about the multiverse or the possibilities at his disposal because of his access to the multiverse. And as he's traveled with Rick and their relationship has evolved, he's become more and more confident. He's more willing to defy Rick. He's more willing to do his own thing instead of follow along with Rick or listen to Rick. And that's basically what last week's entire episode was about. Morty was offered this sword. Rick said, "Don't do it, dude, you'll regret it." And then when Morty ignored him, that was the final insult for Rick. And Rick was right. The Sun Knights wanted Morty to cut off his own dick to join them, but Morty's open defiance of Rick and belittling of Rick's judgment actually got to him. It clearly emotionally affected Rick.
You called me boring. I've become dog shit to you. That's what happens when you let people in and they stop respecting you.
And look, say what you will about the changing dynamics of the show. I understand that the show fundamentally feels different because of the development these characters have gone through. And to many, it isn't as engaging as it was in seasons 1 through 3. But I really respect how thorough this character development is being explored. Every character is changing in believable ways for a group that has experienced as much as they have. Morty's growing understanding and confidence absolutely tracks and has been worked into the show in a satisfying, gradual way, even if it's mostly been explored in my least favorite seasons of the show. The Smith family themselves have seen similar development, growing more and more accustomed to the multiversal shenanigans. We probably got the most prominent Jerry development we've ever seen this year. But I think Rick's development, as showcased in this episode, is also really commendable. Because while Morty and the Smith family develop because of their experiences with the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, Rick is a character who has already experienced these infinite possibilities. And the things that are changing Rick have have entirely to do with forming actual human relationships and connection. It's clear that Rick loves and cares about Morty, to the point where Morty outright ignoring Rick's advice actually genuinely hurt Rick. He walked away from the situation because it bothered him so much, and continued his ongoing pursuit of Rick Prime, and we'll get back to that soon. So yeah, while I admit that I don't love the latest 3 seasons as much as I did the first 3 seasons, I still respect the hell out of the work the writers have done to evolve these characters. That remains one of the most satisfying aspects of continuing to follow the show. They easily could have made the show feel like a sitcom where the dynamic between Rick and Morty and the Smith family stagnates and feels exactly the same for 100 episodes, but they didn't. So let's get back to the main plot of this episode, which is honestly pretty simple in a very funny way. Robo Rick, while being an actually good grandpa to the entire Smith family, gets Morty a real lightsaber for Christmas, and it does the noises and everything.
Of course it makes the noises. That's like half the fun.
I expect that people will feel somewhat similarly about this season finale as they did about the season 3 finale, and there are some similarities here. Season 3 and season 6 both had some major reveals, setups, and lore bombs with big implications for the future of the show. In season 3, after the Citadel of Ricks episode, fans were upset that we just got a Rick vs. the President episode to wrap up the season instead of anything with Evil Morty. Similarly, this year we got the big Rick Prime introduction in the season premiere, and we get once again another President versus episode as the finale. However, it does seem the writers recognized how that went over last time, because they very clearly sprinkled Rick Prime teases and story elements throughout here to satiate that part of the fandom, though I'm not sure it was quite enough. But again, we'll get there. I will say, I do think I enjoyed this romp on a comedic level more than I did the season 3 finale. While season 3 gave us Rick vs. the President, this one is kind of actually Morty vs. the President. When Morty accidentally drops his new lightsaber blade down perfectly vertically, it heads towards the core of the Earth and threatens to destroy the entire planet. The President comes around to help them retrieve it and stop this from happening, but as it turns out, his ulterior motive was to get the lightsaber for himself. The President spits a lot of opinions about Star Wars towards Morty in a very judgmental way, which I think is a pretty funny representation of the Star Wars fandom as a whole. He preaches about the state of Star Wars, critical of nearly every aspect of the franchise's history, explaining to Morty why it isn't so great. But the ultimate irony was, of course, that the President is still obsessed with Star Wars. He actually wanted the lightsaber for himself and was just jealous of Morty, which I think is kind of an apt metaphor for the way some older fans treat the franchise and the younger fans within it. It's almost as though they're jealous seeing younger generations enjoy the newer stuff that they don't enjoy. It's like seeing a kid play with your toy in a way that you wouldn't play with it. And it doesn't matter to them that these kids are having fun and enjoying themselves. They need to say, hey, that's not how you play with that. Honestly, this is a perpetual cycle with the Star Wars fandom. There's always this notion that something specifically ruined Star Wars, and there have been a lot of these things over the entire saga. A lot of fans, including the President here, fell off with Return of the Jedi.
This franchise raised me, trained me, and when that third movie got all muppety, something in me began to rot.
The prequels came out and many of the older fans absolutely hated those, but kids grew up on those movies and loved them, and now they're having a bit of a renaissance popularity-wise because those kids are older and they have nostalgia and appreciation for them. But, of course, now those fans haven't really learned because they're treating the sequels and the sequel fans with the same disdain that they were faced with back in the day. Even though one day, those sequel fans will get older and will almost certainly see the sequels looked at fondly by the younger generation. It's an exhausting cycle. It makes being a Star Wars fan really difficult. I'm tired, but I appreciated the way it was represented here in this episode, where the President literally takes Morty's Star Wars toy away from him to play with it himself. There is absolutely a massive entitlement amongst many in the Star Wars fandom.
Make no mistake, child. I own Star Wars, not you.
And of course the idea that some of these fans insist they know what's best for the franchise, but oftentimes those ideas just sound like this kind of shit.
Here's one, a robot with lightsabers for eyes.
And I'm sure we all saw it coming, but it was pretty funny to see the President drop the lightsaber in the exact same way that Morty did, nearly dooming the Earth once again. I found it incredibly funny the way the President just threw Morty under the bus on national TV, the most powerful man in the world having beef with a 14-year-old and blaming the potential destruction of the planet on him. That's hilarious. It's kind of crazy that Morty nearly assassinated the United States president. Like, truly one robot sacrifice away from being the next Lee Harvey Oswald. But obviously the most interesting part of this episode in terms of implications moving forward is all of Rick's research into finding Rick Prime. Throughout the episode, we see him tinkering with the leftover junk from Rick Prime's space station, and eventually unraveling more information about his whereabouts. Though the issue is that he is apparently everywhere? Okay, so what I do love about this final part of the episode is what it means for Rick himself. At the end of season 5, we learned that hunting down Rick Prime became such an obsession that our Rick nearly killed himself in the process. He basically lost all sense of self. That look on his face as he just decimates the entire Rick population in last year's finale, it's kind of haunting. And we see here that in this season, even after Morty made that plea to him in the season premiere, that Rick almost lost himself again. He isolated himself from his family, from Morty, and he started obsessing on his own. He nearly did the exact same thing that he did before, but now he's deciding to approach it a little bit differently.
Hunting him destroyed me, Morty, but now we're gonna do it together. You and me. It's gonna take over your life, Morty.
And I think this is representative of that change in Rick I mentioned earlier in this video. It's a result of that development. His relationship with Morty is meaningful, and their partnership is meaningful. So he's going to go after Rick Prime with Morty, which also has an entire added layer when you consider that Rick Prime is Morty's biological Rick. It's an exciting setup, but unfortunately, while this time it's more explicit in telling us that this is all happening, this is basically exactly what I was excited about after the season premiere. The Rick Prime setup, the idea of them finally tracking him down, the biological Morty connection. We are now in the Rick Prime era, but we aren't really in any different place with that journey at the end of this finale than we were at the end of the season premiere, which is totally okay, but it does feel like a huge tease. That Rick Prime tag in the season premiere made me think we might get one more little hint of him this season. But it is exciting that Rick has basically explicitly said that this is the mission he and Morty will have as basically their directive moving forward, at least for season 7, even though they also explicitly say that this won't be an every episode development.
Not every episode, Morty. It could be all happening in the background. Who knows? No one will except us.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited by the promise in this idea, but I can't help but feel like this was mostly thrown in the episode to placate some of the backlash they got after that season 3 finale, which I cannot blame them for. I just can't help but think that the teases we got for what's to come were more exciting than what we got for most of this season. I think if I were to rank season finales, 6 is somewhere in the middle. Seasons 2, 4, and 5 kind of really hit it out of the park with those finales, and I don't think this quite lived up to those. But let's talk about season 6 as a whole. How was it? What did I think? Well, I think I mentioned this before, but it feels like there was a bit more of a consistency in quality this season. Like the floor had been raised a tad from the past 2 seasons. However, there were not really any episodes this season that stood out to me as bangers either, which season 4 and 5 absolutely did have. Season 4's Vat of Acid episode, plus that very strong finale. Season 5 had a Rick Convenient Mort, which I adore, plus that finale is undeniable. As a whole, this season was not really bad, but it also didn't have a single episode that blew me away. I think the premiere came closest, and then aspects of Analyze Piss probably made the most emotional impact on me. But I think after Justin Roiland interviewed calling the season more canonical, I'm not sure it really fit that bill. This felt like a season that was laying groundwork for the next big thing, a sort of interstitial season. I loved the development we saw from the family. I loved how much more space Beth was involved in your typical stories this year. I really liked the work they did with Rick and Morty's relationship and dynamic, but it all feels like stuff that is going to hopefully inform some big exciting storylines moving forward with the show. And that's it. That's season 6 of Rick and Morty. I expect season 7 will be late next year, or honestly maybe even early 2024 at their typical pace. Maybe I'll try to throw together some kind of Rick Prime speculation video after rewatching season 6, but other than that, I think we'll probably just all be in the long wait for season 7. But what did y'all think about the season 6 finale, and season 6 as a whole? Did you feel like this was sort of a big tease of a season, or were you satisfied? Are you excited about season 7? Let me know below in the comments, and tell me your favorite episode of season 6 as well. Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more. Peace.
Johnny! Two Cellos!